Good evening, punters, and welcome to another episode of The Tripod, where we break down every single NRL game every week from a betting perspective. This week, we'll be doing our recap round of round 3, what we saw, how we went on our bets, and how we can look at moving forward from what we've learnt in round 3. So, not the best round for us. We went 6-6 on our best bets. Started the round pretty hot, but got a little bit unlucky in the Panthers game. But all in all, I thought a pretty enjoyable round. What did you think, Jacob?
Yeah, it was so good having the footy back. We got an absolute belter this afternoon, which we'll actually talk about last. But lots of great footy action. In terms of the best bets, disappointing. We had 12. We went 6-6, which, as you guys know, when you're risking $11 to win 10, that's an overall marginal loss of nearly, 1 unit, if you want to call each best bet a unit, for the round, which is not great. But I mean, it is still a long season, even though it's a shortened season, 17 more weeks, and that's part of the reason we're here. We're here to face the music. We're trying to learn from what went down in every game, not make excuses, although there might be one or two moments where we did get unlucky, but it's much more important not to be stubborn as a bettor, but to try and find opportunities where you can win the next one.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of probably new listeners that have joined us, this week for the first time, and they might be thinking, "Oh fuck, these guys are no good. They've gone 6-6 in round 1." But I mean, like you said before, we've been doing this for 5.5 years now. We've won every single year. You stick with us, we will win your money. Let's talk about what we just saw, Jacob. It was the Sea Eagles beating the Bulldogs 32 points to 6. We didn't have a best bet on this one. We thought that the Sea Eagles would be too good, but the line was just creeping up a little bit too high for us, and they were clinical. And look, they were really good. And when you've got game breakers like Tommy Turbo, he looks supremely fit. And the worry was, laying big points with Manly was, are they going to come in a little rusty? They weren't. It looks that whole team looks very, very solid. I think Dylan Walker's slotting in very nicely there. He kind of knows his job. In terms of the Bulldogs, man, I've said it 100 times before. I'm going to say it again. They are a stone cold under team. Their fifth tackle options are unimaginative, and they haven't changed in the break that we've had. The only time that they tried something half decent on a fifth tackle or something a little bit different was the little grubber kick in behind, and lo and behold, they scored a try. So I know that the public sees the Bulldogs as probably an under team as well, but even so, I think they're going to struggle to score double digits on a week-to-week basis.
That's right. So we didn't have a bet on the game, and it's pretty clear. If you backed Manly, whether if you laid the points or whatever, you won. If you backed the Dogs, you lost. But it's funny you mentioned the under. It does go under only because Ruben Garrick missed a few kicks there. So that was about the only bet in that game that was in the balance. Manly look super crisp. And someone asked me during the week, who's my tip for Dally M? Just put me on the spot, and I just said Tom Trbojevic. I think it can be his year. And isn't he just such a weapon?
Oh.
Like his footy sense, he always pops up in exactly the right positions, whether to receive an offload or to run onto a ball. He can beat anybody with his speed and agility and power. And then when the defense thinks they've got him, they've keyed in on him and all eyes are on him, he can draw a couple in and then send someone else through untouched. So he is an absolute machine, and they're way too good. And with the Dogs, they played really good footy last year. We talked about pulling a lot of upsets. The difference was that they didn't have the errors in their game. I mean, I talked about how sloppy they were in round 2 against the Cowboys, gave themselves no chance to win, and it was more of the same today. So they have to cut the errors out of their game to even compete with teams at this level.
And you make a good point, because how do you win games? 80% of the time, the team with the most possession wins. And how do you keep possession? You don't make mistakes, and you get repeat sets. And unfortunately, the Bulldogs were doing neither of those two things in this one. Let's move on to Thursday night, and it was the first game after the restart. The Eels beat the Broncos 34 points to 6. We started off well. We had 4 best bets on the game, and we do go 4-0 on our plays. Look, this was the first game back. This was the first game with the one ref. This is the first game with the 6 again rule. And I think I'd just like to talk about it, because I think we spoke about what we think could happen in terms of the 6 again rule. And I think, we saw it. It was 2, very early 6 again calls for the Eels. Got them off to a head start, and they just kind of rolled after that. But I am a fan of the 6 again rule. I really like it. I think it makes the game flow better. I think it is more entertaining for the casual fan, which at the end of the day is what any sporting code wants, is to get those casual fans in. Because, whether they change the rule or not, you and me are still going to watch. But that could be the difference between getting the casual fan in or not. Look, I think the score probably didn't justify how close the game was. I'm not saying that it should have been way closer, but I thought that the Broncos weren't terrible. even though they had very limited possession in the first half, I thought that they almost looked like the fitter team in terms of the forwards. The forwards were still running hard in the final 20 minutes of the game. So that's something positive that the Broncos can take away from that. A few butchered tries. Milf butchered that one early. Darius Boyd butchered one as well. So Broncos could have been a lot closer. I thought that Brodie Croft looked decent. Look, probably not a bad time to bet on the Broncos, moving forward after a drubbing like that everyone saw on national TV on the first game back.
I agree. I really liked, obviously, the new initiative. I think everyone's really positive about it. 6 again and 1 ref, and it does flow more. And the game is faster, and it's had less stoppages, and it's enjoyable to watch. And from a punting perspective, of course, we think that a faster game and more fatigue and less stoppages means more points. And it is funny because I'm sure at least 5, if not 6, of the games this weekend went under. So if you did watch the first 20 minutes of Broncos Eels, as everyone thought, oh man, it's going to be a try-fest this weekend, and smash the overs. And I know pretty much the total in every game was adjusted up after Broncos Eels.
At least 2
didn't
points,
win.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if, that was also a few other things going on. I mean, the ref isn't holding the 10 meters as well. So, I mean, that's something that negates the speed that the attack gets. They can't see as many ruck infringements, which the defense might get away with. But you're making a few excuses for the Broncos. I mean, another one is the Eels are a red hot side, and they came in very sharp, and Gutho fit as a fiddle and just in everything, and he was superb. And I talked about how they had that continuity, and that's why I thought they would come into this game, hit the ground running and win. The Broncos don't have it. You talk about all the guys that are either new or in new positions. And I think the reason Brisbane still played well in round 1 and 2, they just play off the back of their stars. They play off the back of game breakers. So Payne Haas, Dave Fafita, TPJ running over people, barging over people, offloading the ball, and they play off the back of it. When they're missing a couple of those game breakers, they're not nearly as scary. So for me, with Brisbane, they'll build the continuity with the new combinations. They'll get these game breakers back. Then there'll be a problem in the next few weeks to come.
Yes, I agree. Once they get guys, like you said, Fafita back, TPJ back, they will be a force for sure. Let's move on to the Cowboys beating the Titans 36 points to 6 up in Townsville. We didn't have a best bet on this game either. It's another one of those ones where the line was around 8 points, and you just kind of hate to lay a big number a first week back, not knowing what these teams are going to look like. But I thought that the Cowboys look good. I think I'm a bigger fan of the Cowboys than you are, Jacob. I think they've got, I was a fan of them before the season started, and I think they've got, a few more things to be optimistic about. One of my main concerns with this Cowboys team was how is, Valentine Holmes going to slot in there, but now he's had, a couple months off, a few more, weeks to practice under the high ball, that kind of stuff. And you know what else I noticed? I think he's kicking goals better. It's only one game, but he looked a little bit sharper from a goal-kicking perspective, and I think that's good for this Cowboys side. In terms of the Titans, another bad loss for them. I mean, it's a tough trip up to Townsville, first week back, but they held tough for about 25 minutes, and then, I think it was O'Neill scored the try, and that breakaway after the breakaway that Felt made, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And when you're a shit team like the Titans and you start getting down, it's just like that habit that you build. You don't kind of believe that you can come back, and that's kind of what it felt like from watching that second half.
And you talk about snowballing, and before with the Dogs you refer to how you're just shooting yourself in the foot if you can't hold possession. And it's even more important with the new rulings. I think if a team gets ascendancy early in a game, and in this one, the Cowboys, I think off an early Titans era, the Cowboys basically had the footy for 10 straight minutes of play. It's very hard to ever catch back up because you are at that fatigue deficit, basically. And not only are you trying to chase points, but you're gassed, and the other team, is fresher, and it can, exactly like you say, it compounds and it snowballs. To me, I thought it was quite obvious that all the disruption in the Titans' backline really showed. They just look so unorganised. I don't see an improvement in Ash Taylor's game moving him to the 6. I see the same struggles that I saw last year when he was in the 7. Whereas you look at the Cowboys, you could have thought they'd be disrupted, missing Michael Morgan, missing Cooper, but Drinkwater's a star in the making. Yep. Clifford slotted straight in. You mentioned Holmes is looking sharp. And what about Reece Robson? We talked about they got Masters and Holmes, but Robson, especially with the new style of footy, he comes off the bench, scores a couple of tries, and he's live wire. Granville might not be able to hold down a starting hooker job, or even if he does, this guy's a weapon off the bench. So it is positive signs for the Cowboys, but, I mean, they haven't really beaten anybody good yet. They beat the Dogs, they beat the Titans, and they lost to Broncos. So the jury is still out for me. Wait till they show me against a half-decent team, but the signs are positive.
And then next up, we have the Roosters beating the Rabbitohs 28 points to 12. In the pre-pod, we kind of said, in the preview, we said this game could probably go one of two ways. The line was sitting at about 8, and we said the Roosters, it's not a team that you want to bet against first game back 0-2. They could either smash the Rabbits, or this could be, a pretty close game. So that's why we stayed away from this one. But I'll tell you what, any doubt that people had Roosters going 0-2, and we were not one of those people. We kind of knew that the 0-2 made them almost a more dangerous team, and they looked really, really sharp. And you can kind of see the teams that have been focused in that break. And the Roosters seem like one of those teams. Teddy looked awesome as always. And look, in terms of betting, I know that as the weeks go on and the Roosters win more games, you are going to get less value on them. But geez, don't you think that they're even a more dangerous team, let's say, round 4 than coming into round 1 now with a shortened season and with a losing record at the moment? In terms of the Rabbits, I think the main takeaway for me was that they really looked like they missed Cody Walker there. Just from a playmaking ability, they looked like they really struggled in attack. And coming back to your point, Jacob, with changes in backlines and team personnel and stuff, Latrell Mitchell, I know people bag on him constantly, but look, he did not impress me. It looks like he hasn't improved since round 1 and 2. And it's going to be a struggle for that Rabbits team to figure out whether they really want to persist with that Latrell at fullback, because at the moment, he's not helping them.
I won't bag him for this performance. I feel like everyone's watching him with an eagle eye. So anytime he makes a mistake or he's caught out of position, it's so glaring. I thought, his touches, he looked like he was being pretty physical. He was, a bit of a load to handle for the Roosters at times in attack. He's still finding his feet of where exactly he needs to be in defence, and he has a couple of errors in his game. Thought overall I won't take away much from the Rabbitohs because, as you mentioned, they had key outs and the Roosters were clinical. It was clear early in this game that the 0-2 Roosters were coming in laser focus and just weren't going to lose this one. And you look like most of the game they led by about 2 tries. At one stage, the Bunnies even cut it back to 1 try. And they scored such an easy try just off a chip to Tupou. I mean, that should catch nobody by surprise, or just swinging the ball to Cordner and isolating him against Adam Reynolds. Like the Rabbitohs will be very disappointed that they let the Roosters score. That's bread and butter for them, scoring off those opportunities.
It is bread and butter, but they do it so well. It's kind of like,
And Teddy, you mentioned how amazing he was. He's here to remind everyone who the best player on the planet is. He's got a 40-metre try where he beat about 6 people as well. So, again, I think the Rabbitohs would actually be a bit disappointed, but I don't know if anyone would have beat the Roosters on Friday night.
Yeah, he was unreal. Let's get on to a result that shocked me. It was the Warriors bageling the Dragons 18 points to 0. We were on the Dragons. It was not one of my favourite plays of the round, but I definitely thought that the Dragons would get the job done here with the short line. And I'll tell you what, we got -3, and we had 2 best bets on the game. We lost both of them. Obviously, they didn't score a point. We got Dragons -3.5. The game closes 6.5 without pretty much any personnel news. So all the money was flying in on the Dragons, and they just came out flat. And, it was that Dufty with a horrible error early on that led to the first Warriors try, and kind of just snowballed from there. But what I took away is this Dragons side, I think they came into this one saying, look, if we don't make any mistakes, we play conservative, we're a better team than this Warriors side, and we'll just get the win. Because they looked so conservative, didn't you think? Like, that, 5th tackle options, and they'll have a fucking hit-up. They had overlaps on the edges. They pass it to a fucking forward for a hit-up. And it wasn't just once. It was numerous times. So it just seemed like a really conservative game plan for me. Maybe they just thought that they were the superior side and they could just grind out a win. But look, all props to the Warriors. They came out with a point to prove, and we thought that would be the case. But we just thought, that not only are the Warriors pretty talent devoid, but they had a bunch of outs as well. So thought the Dragons would get the job done. But look, all props to the Warriors, and they should be commended, honestly. They kept the comp going, and now they've got their first win of the season.
Mate, taking a hit up on 5th tackle is not conservative. It's fucking garbage. It's useless, and especially when you're chasing points. And I said during the week, like the Dragons, both their halves in Norman and Hunt, played Origin last year. Like, I don't think this team should be clueless on 5th tackle. I mean, come on. And you got your captain McInnes in the 9 of playmaker as well. I was shocked by how bad the Dragons were and just disorganised, and it just made me think...
There's no excuse, because I know the commentators will sometimes say, oh, well, they don't want to give away a 7-tackle set. It's no excuse. You're good enough. Like, you got to
Especially
take a
one,
chance
yeah,
there.
and I mean one of the reasons that our second bet was to play them in the second half is because we did expect the Warriors to come out spirited, and let's give them all the credit in the world. And here's where it begins. They broke the record for most ever completed sets in a single game of NRL. They went 45 of 47. You know, no one's going to really beat a team that completes 45 47. And they weren't playing conservative. They were throwing it around and they were playing with freedom and with, nothing to lose really. And sometimes that can go one of two ways and that can mean you're lackadaisical. But the passes were sticking and they just never gave the Dragons an opening. You're expecting the Dragons to be coming back and at some point they were going to get a look in. And credit to the Warriors, they just kept turning up in defense and never gave them a sniff. But I don't even know, honestly, what the Dragons can do. There's no quick fix. It's going to be a long season for them.
It might be. And another team, it may be a long season for, maybe not. It was the Sharks. They lost 20 to 16 to the Tigers. We did have one best bet on the game that we released on Friday. It was the Tigers plus half a try. That one does get up. This was a really interesting game. I watched the replay today. But the Tigers shot out of the blocks crazy. 2 tries in the first 6 minutes. And then the Sharks came back, scored the next 3. And then the Tigers, they just looked fitter in the second half. And look, I'll admit, Jacob, I was wrong. I sort of had my tiny lean towards the Sharkies. I'll let you convince me on the Tigers, which was good. But I said that the Sharks might be, better towards the start of the season because they have that aging team. And once the rigors of the season catch up to them, that's when you want to fade them down the back end of the stretch when you have older players that will wear down over the back end of the season. So I thought they'd come in hot here, but they did not look the fitter team. The Tigers looked like the fitter team here, and it showed in the second half. I mean, to give up a try off a line dropout without even a pass being thrown is pretty diabolical from this Shark team. So it might be a long season for them as well. But all props to the Tigers, to be honest. Like, you come out of the blocks raring to go, score the first 2, then you're down, but to fight back and to pretty much get a comfortable victory, I thought they looked good.
Oh, the Tigers did look good. You're right. They're up 10-0. Then you blink, they're down 16-10. But then they won the second half 18-0. They were fitter. They were more physical, and they just kept coming all game. I mean, lots to love about him. Luke Brooks back in this team. He's a genuine quality halfback. We know that Benji still has class about him. And Harry Grant, straight into this team. They got to start in him. They're not going to want to let him go.
Yep.
And you're right, like the Sharkies, I mean, Fafita was a scratch, I think, either game day or the day before the match. And you talk about this team has struggled to get their key players on the paddock. And you've got a guy with a lingering knee injury that could be right after a 10-week layoff. So it is tough sledding for them. The try you talk about, Chad Townsend basically had a torn hammy trying to make a tackle on Nufaluma there. So I think it will be a really long season for the Sharks. I watched the press conferences and some coaches, like in the next game, I'll talk about a coach called Craig Bellamy, and he was angry. But he's angry because he knows his team can do better. But I listened to these coaches like Holbrook and Johnny Morris and Mary, and they actually starting to sound like they don't know what the answer is. They sound a bit forlorn, a bit helpless. So it's really tough for the Sharks. But look, signs are looking up for the Tigers. They're a team I don't mind being on.
And next up, what many people thought would be the game of the round, it was the Storm losing to the Raiders 6 points to 22. We were on the Storm in that one. We had 3 best bets. We were fairly confident. And obviously, as you can see, all 3 bets did lose. And the Raiders were just too good in this one. Look, I thought this would be a cracker of a game. I thought the Storm would be too good at Amy Park. But look, I know a lot of people think that the Storm were horrific in this one. I'm sort of on the other side. I thought it was a quality game, to be honest. I thought the Storm weren't terrible. I thought the score probably didn't reflect how close the game was. The Storm butchered a couple of chances. They had, numerous opportunities and just couldn't convert, whereas the Raiders pretty much converted on every single one of their quality looks. The Storm did the opposite. Look, I thought Munster looked really good, as always. I mean, I know I've been, not as high on Munster as you, but I thought he was, definitely the Storm's best player on the park on the day. What I will say is Pappenhausen needs to learn how to pass. There was a number of opportunities. I counted about 3 where he got the ball in quality spot, towards the wing, and one extra pass would have been a Storm try, and he just can't let go of the ball. Onto the Raiders, there was really quality performance by them, and the defense was what stood out to me. I know that the Raiders had one of the better defenses last year, one of the better defenses to start this season, but Jesus, every Storm opportunity, the Raiders were there, and even just the physicality of this Raiders defense. Like, some of the tackles, I know they were playing the fake crowd noises, but some of those tackles from the Raiders were absolutely crunching, minimal mistakes. This Raiders team is certainly a contender. We thought that before, but they haven't skipped a beat over this layoff.
Yeah, where do we begin? So 3 best bets, and I don't regret them. I'm not here to make excuses, but again, what do we lay? -3.5,
Yep.
and it closed 6 in
Yes.
places, at
Yep.
least 5.5 everywhere. You could not bet the Storm over 19.5 points on game day, but we had that bet. And second half -1.5 was gone as well. So you're sitting there with 3 good bets in your pocket. You said you thought it'd be a cracking game. I didn't even expect a good game. I thought the Storm would be way too good. And you start watching it, and a sweet cutout ball by Whiten and nice hands by Croker, and the Raiders are in. Okay, fair play, good try. And then the second try, George Williams, a triple cutout on the money, and you're in for 12-0. All right, I admit I was getting a little bit worried, but I just wanted to see what the Storm could do. And I'm not here to take away from the Raiders. It was a really good performance, and now we see why they bought George Williams. We see that he can take them to the next level, because the first 2 weeks, who'd they beat? The Titans and Warriors. You
Right.
know, you can't really tell how good he was. He wasn't tested, but man, he's a gun player. They got a good one there. And Johnny Bateman hasn't even come back into this team.
Dude puts on some hits too.
Yeah, and I'll admit that I'm wrong in the sense that I underestimated how sharp and how intense the Raiders would be straight away, because I thought that they would be a side that would build into the season. But I think that the break has done them good, and they've come out just ready to roll. And I will give them credit. The Storm had a lot of errors last night, but some of that is forced errors. They were under pressure all night. But seriously, was I watching the Melbourne Storm? Because I have never seen them play that way. And I mean, the amount of chances they created and then didn't execute, and This is the team that is, so clinical usually. They didn't value possession all game when they were mounting pressure, those early tackle count errors. Sum up the whole night. Nelson Asafa-Solomona grubbered for himself on third tackle on the goal line. If that doesn't tell you that this team dead set dropped acid before kickoff or something, I mean, I don't know what to believe, but I'm not going to write the Storm off, because honestly, people will say they got flogged, but as you say, they had so many chances, including like with that grubber behind where Olam had the ball and score. You score that, 99 times out of 100, probably more, they somehow miraculously hold him up. Any one of those chances cuts the game to 6. With whatever it be, 15, 10, 5 minutes left, it was still game on. So, in fact, and then the Raiders scored on the final play, which makes the score look larger. So I actually think it's going to present an opportunity to get on the Storm. I'm certainly not writing them off. I think that was just a real head scratcher.
And if I can make you feel better, Jacob, I'll tell you one thing. Big Nelson, after the spray that Bellamy will give him that night and the day after, he will not be kicking another grubber all season long.
The commentators thought they might actually get dragged.
Let's get on to the early game today, and it was the best game of the round. It was the Panthers having a draw with the Newcastle Knights, 14 points all. It wasn't great for us, though. We loved the Panthers in this one, and they gave up a 14-point lead. So instead of going 2-0 on those best bets and finishing out a winning round, we go 1-1 and just miss out on the Panthers -1.5, which is disappointing, but it was a good game. And the Panthers, God, they had every opportunity to win this game. And once Pierce went down within the first 5 minutes, you see the odds just drop massively in favour of the Panthers. They get on top, they score 3 tries, and you think it's absolutely over. But look, props to the Knights, honestly, because it's so easy to give up them. They had people dropping like flies. I think at one point they were down to 1 or 2 on the bench, and they came back and all the way back to 14 all. Look, I thought the Panthers forwards were dominant in the first half, and I thought the Knights forwards were dominant in the second half. And once again, it was one of those games where it's a tale of two halves with the Panthers, and it seems to be they just cannot get away from this, and they want to turn themselves into an elite team, but they just cannot find themselves, executing these games that they are up in. So, but all props to the Knights, to be honest, because you lose, Mitchell Pearce early. You're down 14-0, and that takes some guts to come back from that. But let me ask you this, Jacob, and you can break down the game as well, but I know we've spoken about extra time. Is that what you want to see in an extra time?
Not when I've got -1.5.
No, of
and I
course
know
not.
the team
Of course not. As a fan.
that I'm on is only interested in scoring one. And I feel like
Yep.
often if the teams would go for the try, it would be on because everyone gets tunnel vision.
Yep.
But hey, it was drama. I agree.
was.
It was the game of the season. Both teams thought they had it won multiple times. I'm going to have a whinge and say, how did we not win both those best
No, of
bets you
course.
talk about?
Of
We had
course.
-1.5. Someone said during live betting with obviously Pierce out after 5 minutes. Watson was out 5 minutes later. Fitzgibbon was scratched before kickoff. We know Ponga was suspended. Barnett was injured in round 2. They lost Brayley in round 1. They haven't brought McCulloch in to replace him, right? The live line was -24.5. And
Seems
it looked like
crazy.
Panthers by how many?
I know,
Honestly, they
I
had.
know.
I honestly was barely watching it because I don't believe you can learn a lot from a game when it's so lopsided. So I was so comfortable. And then when they let in that try right before halftime, and I think you said Panthers scored 3 tries, but actually it was 2 because they got
You're
an
right. They
8-point
scored
try.
the 8-point try. You're right.
But to give up such an easy, soft try, which was not for a repeat set or anything, it was just 30 seconds left in the half, and they let the Knights in. That you don't take your foot off the throat ever. And the funny thing about the Panthers, they've got so much talent and they're dangerous when they're chasing points, but they don't know what to do when they're leading. And they definitely missed Cleary because he would have steadied the ship and he would have helped them manage that game, probably get out of a win. But no excuses for the Panthers. Let's give all the praise in the world to the Knights. If you are a Knights fan, you have every reason to be stoked with that result, even though you'll be thinking, if Bradman Best goes himself, they could have won. Yeah, but there were field goals that hit the post too. You could have lost. That squad will take so much out of that with all the players I mentioned who are out, everything up against you, down 14-0. It really shows Adam O'Brien has made an immediate impact. And when they do get the stars back on deck, they can be special this year. But again, and you know what? I'll even say one more thing. I actually will admit that the Panthers were probably the wrong side because when you consider how much went their way and they still couldn't win, I think the Knights were probably the better bet today. So as much as I'll whinge we didn't go 2-0, it could have, if Mitchell Pearce plays the whole game, we'd probably go 0-2. So I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong as well. And that game, it was a wild one for the observer, and hopefully we can learn from that for next week.
Indeed, and that wraps up the 8 games for the round. So 6 and 6. At least we didn't lose a huge amount of money this week. But yes, looking at the first round back after a while, I think you learn the most from. What kind of teams are up for it and what teams look like. So I think we'll be better off for it next week. So make sure you tune in for the round 4 preview. We will be on NRL Zero Fucks Given on Facebook live at 6 p.m. on Wednesday to break down round 4 in the NRL. We'll catch you then, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Lego.